Hello everyone, my name is the Storyteller, and today I will share with you some horror stories to help you fall asleep. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. But before that, write down in the comments where you are listening this and what time it is. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss upcoming horror stories. The static started on a Tuesday night. Emma Doyle was editing late, wedding photos mostly, when her speakers crackled with a faint hiss. At first, she thought it was her phone. Then the whisper came through. Not a voice exactly, more like breath pressed against a microphone. She froze, mouse hovering midair. The whisper wasn't random. It carried rhythm, like someone trying to form words but too close to the mic for them to make sense. The sound sent a shiver racing up her arms. Then it stopped. Her apartment returned to silence, except for the hum of her computer fans and her heartbeat drumming in her ears. She laughed it off, checked the audio settings, and continued working. But when she played the next video clip, the static returned. And through the noise, a faint male voice said her name. The next morning, Emma left her apartment for work. The sky was gray, her coffee bitter, and she couldn't shake the unease. The whisper had sounded real, like someone on the other end of a call. When she returned that evening, something sat on her doormat, a printed photograph. It was a picture of her, sitting at her computer the night before. Her heart nearly stopped. She looked down the hall empty. Her hands trembled as she turned the photo over. On the back, written in red ink, "I like when you focus." She locked her door, called the police, and filed a report. The officer who came by, a tired man with deep-set eyes, shrugged. "Probably a prank," he said. "You post your stuff online, right? Some people get too attached." She nodded, but deep down she knew this wasn't random. That whisper had known her name. 3 nights later, Emma noticed the van. White, unmarked, parked across the street, headlights off, engine idling. It was there when she went to bed and there when she woke up. She tried to ignore it, but it felt like eyes pressing against her windows. Her cat hissed at the door. Every noise became suspect: footsteps in the hallway, clicks on the floor above, even the tick of her old wall clock. That evening, she closed her blinds and unplugged her computer speakers. At 2:17 a.m., the whisper returned from inside her headphones, disconnected from any device. "Don't close the blinds, Emma. I like watching." Emma wasn't the first. Detective Mason Grady had been chasing similar reports for months: strange calls, static voices, mysterious photos left behind. Each case ended the same way. The victim vanished within weeks. He called the unsub the Watcher. Every scene had the same pattern. No forced entry, no witnesses, only the lingering smell of cigarettes and faint traces of recording equipment. Whoever the Watcher was, he was methodical, patient. When Emma's report crossed his desk, something in it hit too close. The photo on her doormat, the whispering audio files, the pattern was identical. He visited her the next day. Emma looked pale, exhausted. Her apartment was spotless except for her workspace, monitors, cables, and an old DSLR. Mason asked if she'd noticed anyone following her. "Yes," she said. "There's a van, it's always there." He crossed to the window. The street below was empty. "Van gone," he said quietly. Emma's breath hitched. "It's never gone." Mason looked down again. On the curb where the van had been parked sat a disposable camera. Inside the camera were 6 photos. The first, Emma asleep at her desk. The second, Emma brushing her teeth. The third, Emma walking down the hallway of her apartment building. The fourth, Emma talking to Detective Grady at her window. The fifth, a close-up of the detective's face taken from just outside the glass. The sixth, a blurry shot of a man standing behind Emma's curtain, his face covered with a cracked plastic mask. Mason felt the air leave his lungs. He looked around the apartment, gun half drawn, but there was no one there. Then he noticed something glinting behind Emma's desk, a tiny black lens embedded in the wall outlet. He leaned closer. It wasn't a camera. It was a microphone connected to a wire running down through the floorboards. When he crouched to trace it, he heard it. The faint sound of static, whispering through the speaker grill. Detective Mason Grady crouched on the hardwood, flashlight trembling in his grip. The wire ran straight down through the vent slit beneath Emma's desk. He pried it open with his pocket knife and saw what lay beneath, a small black transmitter, still warm to the touch. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. Emma stood in the doorway, her hands pressed to her mouth. "What is that?" "It's a live feed," Mason said. "Someone been listening, maybe even watching." Her voice cracked. "From where?" He shone the light deeper into the vent. The wire slithered under the floor, through the insulation, and disappeared into the far wall, the one she shared with the apartment next door. "Who lives beside you?" "No one," Emma whispered. "That unit been empty for months." Mason stood. "Not anymore." He called for backup, but when they forced open the neighboring apartment, it was already stripped bare. No furniture, no clothes, just the lingering smell of cigarettes and a single object left on the counter. A reel-to-reel tape recorder. Its spools turned slowly, though no one had pressed play. The tape hissed with static, and through it came the same distorted whisper Emma had heard days before. "Smile for me, Emma." The police seized the recorder, but the tape had been overwritten several times. Mason sent it to forensics anyway. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the whisper in his mind, trying to place the tone calm, deliberate, emotionless, a voice used to command. At 3:09 a.m. his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Silence. Then the whisper returned, faint, distant but unmistakable. "Detective Grady, you shouldn't have touched my work." He slammed the phone down, heart hammering. When he picked it back up, the line was dead, and his call history showed no incoming call. The next morning, he drove back to Emma's building. Her door was open. He shouted her name, weapon drawn, and found her in the living room, shaking uncontrollably. Her laptop screen was glowing in the dim light, a video playing on loop. It was her own security footage. The clip showed Emma asleep on her couch. Then at exactly 2:47 a.m., the image flickered. A shadow passed through the frame, tall, thin, wearing that same cracked plastic mask. He stood over her for exactly 1 minute, watching. Then the video cut to static. Emma had no memory of it. Her clock showed 3:47 when she woke up, 1 hour missing from the night. Mason ordered a sweep of the entire building. He wasn't letting another case slip away. In the basement, officers found a locked maintenance door behind a stack of old paint cans. It wasn't on the building's blueprint. The padlock was new. They broke it open. Behind the door was a narrow stairway descending into concrete darkness. The air was stale, thick with the smell of rust and mold. At the bottom, a small room waited, windowless, lit by a single red bulb swinging overhead. The walls were covered with photos. Hundreds of them, victims' faces. Every one of them caught mid-movement, brushing their hair, walking to work, eating dinner. All of them watched, all unaware. And in the center of the room, on an old chair, sat a mannequin head wearing the cracked plastic mask. A small speaker had been mounted inside its mouth. When Mason stepped closer, it activated. "Detective Grady," the voice whispered through the static. "You found my studio, I'm proud." Mason tore the mask from the mannequin, and underneath, taped to its chin, was a SIM card. The SIM card led nowhere, an unregistered burner, but the forensic team extracted fragments of text messages from it. Coordinates, timestamps, and one chilling message sent 2 nights ago. "Stage 4, she's ready." Mason scrolled through the partial data, noting the same pattern from his past cases. The killer categorized his victims like performances. Stage 1, observe. Stage 2, contact. Stage 3, infiltrate. Stage 4, perform. No one had ever made it to stage 5. Emma sat across from him in the precinct, pale and shaking. "Why me?" she asked. "I don't even know him." Mason hesitated. "It's not personal. He chooses people who won't be believed at first, people with cameras, microphones, the kind who document themselves." Her eyes widened. "He watches people who watch themselves." "Exactly." The detective paused. "Do you ever stream, Emma? Live stream, maybe?" She nodded slowly. "I used to photography tutorials. I stopped months ago." "Did you delete them?" "No, they're still online." Mason's stomach sank. "That's how he found you." At 11:42 that night, the live stream went live again. Neither Emma nor Mason had touched her account. The title read, "The Final Frame Live." The chat was exploding with viewers, hundreds of people who thought it was a performance art piece. The stream showed a dimly lit room, the same red light swinging, same cracked mask hanging from a hook. Then the camera shifted. Emma sat tied to a chair, gagged, eyes wide in terror. Mason's phone buzzed. The alert came from the cyber unit. "Stream coming from her apartment IP," the text said. "But that's impossible. You said you evacuated her." "I did," Mason barked. "She's right here." He turned. The seat beside him was empty. He looked around the precinct, every officer frozen in confusion. She was right here, she. The static buzzed faintly from the police radio. He picked it up. "Stage 5 complete." The red light flickered on his desk, a tiny LED camera dot hidden in his office wall. And from the other side of the lens, the watcher whispered, "Your turn now, detective." The morning after the broadcast, Mason didn't go home. He sat alone in his office as the city woke outside, the faint sirens of morning traffic bleeding through the blinds. His monitor still glowed with the paused live stream, Emma tied to that chair, the red light swinging like a heartbeat. They traced the IP again. It led to a warehouse on the edge of town, abandoned since the late 90s. Mason drove there alone. Inside, dust lay thick as snow. Empty tripods stood like skeletons. Coiled wires snaked across the floor, connecting to an array of cameras pointed at the center of the room. And there, half buried under debris, he found a small television set playing static. When he wiped the screen clean, it flickered. He saw himself. Live footage, the same suit, same expression. The image matched him exactly, except for one detail: the version on screen was smiling. Then it lifted a finger and pointed directly at the camera. The TV went black. Mason stumbled back, pulse hammering. He'd been in this line of work for 18 years. He'd seen bodies, mutilations, confessions that broke people. But this felt supernatural. Except it was. It was engineered. Someone was building this fear piece by piece. And now Mason was part of the production. He called it in. The tech unit arrived, swept the building, and found nothing live. All the footage was preloaded on motion triggers. Whoever had set it up knew exactly how to play him. When Mason got home that night, the air felt wrong. Too still. He placed his gun on the counter and moved through the apartment with his flashlight. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. The half-empty whiskey glass, the stack of unsorted case files, the photo of his ex-wife on the shelf. Then he reached his bedroom. There was a mirror leaning against the far wall, one he didn't own. A tall, rectangular mirror, edges chipped, faint smudges like fingerprints on the glass. His reflection looked off. The lighting seemed delayed, as if the image was a half-second behind reality. He leaned in. A whisper brushed his ear. "Smile, detective." The reflection smiled, but Mason didn't. He raised his gun and fired. The mirror shattered, spraying glass across the floor. Behind it, wedged into the drywall, was a small pinhole camera and a speaker wired to a portable battery. The battery was still warm. He tore the wall apart. Behind the insulation, someone had carved words into the wooden frame. The next day, Mason requested surveillance on himself. 2 patrol units rotated outside his apartment. He still couldn't sleep. Every noise became amplified, the creak of the building, the static hum in his phone charger, even the rain sliding down the glass like veins. At 3:14 a.m., he looked out the window. Across the street, under the sodium light, sat a white van. No plates. He grabbed his jacket and stormed outside, gun holstered, badge visible. Rain soaked through his collar as he approached. The van's windshield was fogged over from the inside. He yanked the door open. Empty. Only a small TV screen sat on the passenger seat, powered by a portable generator humming quietly. Mason turned it toward him and froze. The feed was live. His own hallway. His apartment door. The timestamp 3:14 a.m. He sprinted back up the stairs, kicked open his door and stopped dead. The TV inside his apartment had turned itself on. The same feed played there too, but this time the camera angle had changed. Now it showed him standing at the doorway, watching himself. The whisper crackled through the speakers. "You're doing great, detective. The audience loves you." Mason's sanity began to fray. Everywhere he went, he found fragments of himself. A recording of his voice on strangers' phones. Snippets of him talking to no one. Emails he never sent appearing in his outbox with subject lines like Scene 3 rehearsal notes. He turned to the one place the watcher couldn't manipulate, the police archives, a cold concrete basement beneath the precinct. He pored over old reports, comparing handwriting, speech patterns, every case that matched. Then he found it. A file dated 2008. Victim, Lucas Bray. Survived an abduction by a man wearing a cracked plastic mask. Claimed the attacker recorded every second and whispered directions like a film director. Case was dismissed, labeled delusional. The suspect was never caught. Bray's last known address, a psychiatric facility 2 hours north. Mason drove there before sunrise. The staff hesitated to let him in. "Bray doesn't talk anymore," the nurse said. "He hasn't said a word in 15 years. But when Mason entered the room, the man sitting by the window turned his head slowly, eyes bloodshot and distant. "You can hear it too," Bray whispered. Mason froze. "Hear what?" "The static, it comes before he speaks. He never stops filming." "Who?" Bray smiled weakly. "The director." Bray spoke in fragments. His voice was raw, like he hadn't used it in years. "He doesn't kill for pleasure," he said. "He kills for story. He thinks the world's one long film. Every scream, every tear part of his script." Mason took notes, his hand trembling. "Why the recordings, the live streams?" "Because that's how he exists," Bray whispered. "He's nothing without an audience. He picks people who document themselves and then he rewrites their lives. When he's finished, he uploads their last scene." Mason leaned forward. "How does he choose the next one?" Bray's eyes darted toward the security camera in the corner. "He already has." The light on the camera flicked from red to green. Static flooded the intercom. A voice slipped through, calm and familiar. "Cut, gentlemen," the watcher said softly. "Perfect delivery." Mason spun around, gun drawn, but the hallway beyond the door was empty. Then, from somewhere deep in the facility, an alarm began to wail. Doors slammed shut automatically. Over the speakers, the voice continued, echoing in every corridor. "Welcome to Scene 4, Detective Grady. The setting, isolation. The theme, breakdown." The lights flickered. The patients began to scream. And Mason realized, as the power died, that the watcher wasn't just recording him anymore. He was directing him. The lights flickered 3 times, then the asylum went dark. Only the red emergency bulbs pulsed along the corridor, bathing the walls in rhythmic blood light. The sirens wailed in short bursts, like labored breathing. Somewhere far down the hall, glass shattered. Security lockdown, a voice barked over the intercom. All personnel remain in your stations. The message cut off mid-sentence, swallowed by static. Mason tried his radio, nothing but noise. The signal was jammed. He pressed his back to the wall, listening. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly, uneven, deliberate. Not running, walking. He aimed his flashlight toward the noise, a dim cone slicing through the red gloom. The beam caught movement for a second, someone tall, wearing a pale coat, standing motionless at the end of the hallway. The figure raised its head slowly. Then the lights went out completely. In the dark, the voice whispered from every direction. Scene 4, the detective loses the light. Mason fired. The muzzle flash briefly illuminated the figure, a mask glinting white, before the darkness swallowed everything again. He ran. He barricaded himself inside an old therapy office. The walls were covered in peeling floral wallpaper and the faint smell of antiseptic. In the glow of his dying flashlight, Mason found an ancient projector on the desk, still plugged in. A reel of film sat on the platter labeled Patient Observation, Room 302. He hesitated, then turned it on. The projector clicked and began to play. The film jittered across the far wall, grainy black and white footage of a man sitting in the same room. Mason leaned forward, realization striking like cold water. It was him. Same shirt, same holster, same tired eyes. He watched himself staring back through the years. The version of him on film looked up suddenly, directly into the camera, and whispered something. Mason turned up the volume. The voice was faint but clear. You won't make it to scene 5. The film sputtered and melted in the projector gate, releasing the smell of burning celluloid. Behind him, the door creaked. He turned, weapon raised, but no one entered. Only the faint static of a nearby speaker hissing to life. The director's voice murmured, "Beautiful work, detective. That fear in your eyes, that's what I was waiting for." Hours blurred together, or maybe it was minutes. In the flickering red light, time had no shape. Mason moved through the asylum like a ghost, gun low, step silent. Every corridor looked the same, cracked linoleum, numbered doors, faint drips echoing from above. He found the records room. Dust covered everything in a gray film. Dozens of patient files were spread across the floor as if someone had thrown them like cards. He kneeled and began flipping through them, all dated decades apart, but every file had one common note in the psychiatrist line. Dr. Alaric Vale. That name struck him like lightning. Vale wasn't a patient. He was the head psychiatrist of this facility, back before it shut down in 1999. The same year, the first Watcher murders began. He opened Vale's personnel file. Inside was a photo, black and white, grainy but unmistakable. Tall man, sharp jaw, calm expression. And in the photo, his eyes were fixed directly on the camera, as if looking through time at whoever would open this file. The signature at the bottom, A. Vale, Director of Behavioral Observation. On the next page, someone had scrawled in red ink, "He never stopped observing." The siren stopped abruptly. Silence filled the asylum like fog. Mason followed a faint humming, electrical, rhythmic, until he reached the auditorium. The doors were slightly ajar. He pushed them open and froze. The hall was enormous, draped with cables. Rows of monitors lined the stage, each displaying footage from hundreds of hidden cameras. Some showed the asylum corridors, others showed random city streets, and some showed inside his apartment. Every screen bore the same watermark in the corner. Movie camera, the director's cut movie camera. On the center monitor, a new feed began. A close-up of Mason's face from moments ago, entering the auditorium. The footage was looping in real time, barely 1 second delayed. He raised his gun and aimed directly at the camera above the stage. Before he could fire, the screen changed again, this time showing Emma. She was alive. Bound, gagged, eyes wide, sitting in the same red-lit room from the live stream. Then text appeared at the bottom of the screen. Final scene in progress, 00, 15:43 remaining. Mason bolted for the exit, but the doors slammed shut, locking him inside. The countdown ticked lower, 00, 14:59, 00, 14:58. Through the speakers, the director spoke in a calm, almost fatherly tone. Every story needs a finale, detective. You should be proud. You've been the perfect lead. Mason tore at the control cables, smashing monitors, trying to break through the steel door. The ticking of the countdown echoed like a heartbeat. Then one of the smaller screens flickered, showing his own body cam feed from years ago, during his first Watcher case. He saw himself finding a victim's remains, then looking straight at the lens. Except the version on screen whispered, "You're next." The lights dimmed to near black. One final screen stayed on, a mirror feed showing Mason in the middle of the stage. Except now he wasn't alone. A tall man stood behind him, face hidden by the cracked mask. His voice was a low murmur through the speakers. "Relax, we're just rehearsing." Mason spun, gun raised, but the stage was empty. The whisper came again, closer now. "Don't ruin the take." A cold hand gripped his shoulder from behind. He turned and fired. The bullet shattered a projector lens, and the entire hall plunged into blackness. But before the sound died, Mason heard the faint whir of a camera reel turning. Then the voice, soft and satisfied. "Cut." The red light blinked once, and the feed went dead. Mason woke to sunlight. For one dizzy second he believed he'd dreamed it all, the asylum, the whispers, the mask. His apartment looked exactly as it had before everything fell apart. Same stack of case files, same mug ring on the table, the same city sounds drifting through the window. Except the clock on the wall read 7:03 a.m., and the second hand wasn't moving. He reached for his phone, no signal. The battery icon was frozen at 67%. When he opened the blinds, the street outside was empty. No cars, no wind. The leaves on the trees were utterly still, as if the world had been paused. A voice floated from his television. "Good morning, Detective Grady. Let's pick up where we left off." The screen glowed to life on its own. It showed the same room he was standing in, same angle, same light, except he wasn't in the frame. A moment later, he walked into it. On the kitchen counter lay a stack of papers held together by a binder clip. The first page was labeled, "The director's cut shooting script." Scene 5, the detective realizes he's fictional. Each page described, line by line, everything Mason had done for the past month, every word, every breath, every heartbeat. The paragraphs ended with camera directions. He flipped to the final page. There, in the same careful typeface, was a line that hadn't yet happened. He opens the script, sees his name, and hears the knock at the door. 3 slow knocks echoed through the apartment. He froze, the script slid from his hands. He didn't answer. Instead, he circled to the peephole. Nothing. Then faintly, a whisper on the other side of the wood. "You're late for rehearsal." The voice was almost kind, low, patient, the tone of a teacher correcting a favorite student. Mason stepped back. The knock came again, softer this time, then stopped altogether. The silence pressed in. He turned toward his window. Outside, the frozen world had changed. A crowd of people stood motionless in the street, faces tilted up toward his window. Every one of them held a camera. Their eyes were blank. The phone rang. He answered, breathless. The director's voice was calm, almost smiling. "You see them, don't you? The audience. They've been watching since scene one." The televisions around the room flickered to life, all of them. Screens he didn't own emerged from the darkness of the walls themselves, endless squares of blue light stacked to the ceiling. Each screen showed a moment from his life. The night he graduated the academy. The day he lost his first partner. The interview with Emma. Every sound overlapped into a growing roar of memory until he couldn't tell what was real and what was playback. Then all the clips stopped at once and merged into a single image. Mason sitting exactly where he stood now, reading from the script. A cursor blinked at the bottom of the screen, as if someone were typing live. Words appeared one by one. "Do you want to finish the story, detective?" Mason whispered, "What happens if I say no?" The cursor hesitated, then replied, "Then the film never ends." He closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was standing in the red-lit room, the one from every recording, the one he'd seen Emma in. The chair was empty now. The walls pulsed faintly with light, breathing like a living thing. A camera stood in front of him, recording. Beyond it in the shadows, the director waited. The mask was gone. His face was ordinary, forgettable, the kind you'd never notice in a crowd. Only the eyes were wrong, clear, reflective, as if made of glass. "You did beautifully," the director said. "Every scene honest, every doubt authentic. I couldn't have written you better." Mason's voice was a whisper. "Why me?" "Because you kept watching," the director replied. "All stories need witnesses." The room brightened until the red became white. The hum of the camera grew into a wall of static, and Mason realized the lens wasn't recording him anymore. It was recording through him, past him, toward something unseen. The director stepped closer. "Last line, detective, say it for me." Mason looked into the light. He wanted to scream, to run, to tear the film apart. But instead, the words came on their own, steady and resigned. "Cut." The light swallowed everything. Somewhere far away, an audience began to applaud. The world returned as a hum. When Mason opened his eyes, he was sitting on a park bench. Morning light filtered through mist. Joggers passed, dogs barked. The city moved as if nothing had happened. His badge sat in his lap. His service weapon was gone. For a long time, he just listened to the sound of normal life. It felt almost sacred after so many nights of static. Then he noticed the pigeon on the pavement in front of him, its head tilting in small jerks, studying him. Around its leg was a red tag marked AV. He looked up. A man in a gray coat stood across the street, smoking. For an instant, the sunlight hit the lenses of the man's sunglasses, and Mason saw a reflection of himself, frozen mid-gesture, just like an image on pause. When he blinked, the man was gone. The hum of traffic deepened, folding into static again. Back at the precinct, the file on the director had been sealed. No one mentioned the asylum. No one mentioned Emma. Officially, the case never existed. Mason couldn't accept that. He went to evidence storage, where dust covered the shelves like snowdrifts. A small box waited under his name. Inside, one tape reel labeled Final Cut. He fed it into an old player. The screen stayed black for several seconds before showing a single frame, an empty interrogation room. Then words appeared in white text. "Thank you for your performance." Then his own voice, soft, uncertain, recorded without him knowing, murmured, "Was it real?" Another voice, the director's, answered from somewhere behind the camera. "Reality is just an editing choice." The film ended there, but the machine kept running, spooling an invisible reel that never ran out. 2 nights later, he received an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read behind the lens. Attached was a single audio file less than a minute long. He pressed play. First came the hiss of wind, then Emma's voice, quiet but clear. "He's still filming, Mason. He doesn't need cameras anymore. People carry their own." A burst of static followed, then the faint click of a shutter. The timestamp on the file was the current date and time, sent seconds before he'd opened it. He checked the address again. It wasn't an address at all, just a string of numbers that changed each time he looked at it. Sleep abandoned him. He spent the nights driving aimlessly through the city until one evening he saw a flicker of light in an old theater downtown, the Vale Picture House, closed for decades. The marquee read, "Tonight the director's cut." He stepped inside. Rows of empty seats faced a single glowing screen. Dust drifted in the projector beam like snow. The film began. It showed ordinary scenes of the city, then people sitting at their desks, watching their screens, faces he recognized from the cases, from the reports, from his own memories. Each turned slowly toward the camera, eyes hollow, and whispered the same words. "Are you watching?" Mason stood, trembling. The projector light shifted, and for a heartbeat he saw his own silhouette standing among them, one more face in the audience. Morning again. The city looked the same, but Mason noticed small glitches, traffic lights blinking out of rhythm, people pausing mid-stride as if waiting for a cue. Every phone screen on the train showed the same frozen frame, a close-up of an eye. He lifted his own phone. The front-facing camera was on, though he hadn't opened it. In the reflection, the apartment behind him was visible, his old one, the way it had looked weeks ago, red light pulsing faintly through the blinds. A soft voice came through the speaker. "Scene 1, take 2. The screen went dark. The train kept moving. Somewhere far away, a film projector began to spin, and the sound blended with the ordinary hum of the city until they were the same thing. The world itself whispering in static. Months later, a young digital forensics student stumbled across a corrupted folder in the precinct archives titled Static Logs. Most of the files were unreadable except one short clip. Detective Mason Grady turning toward the camera, tired but calm, saying only, "If you hear it, turn it off." The clip ended with the faint click of a reel starting over. No one could delete the file. Every time it was erased, it reappeared slightly longer than before. And somewhere unseen, an audience kept watching. No one called it a virus at first. The news used words like fever cluster and neuroinflammation. A handful of cases, they said, contained. Ethan Shaw didn't care much about the news. He was too busy driving home from another overnight shift at the freight depot outside Chicago. His radio hissed between stations, every channel filled with static except one faint voice repeating, "Stay indoors. Do not make contact with infected persons." He turned the dial again, irritated. Probably a prank broadcast. Then his phone buzzed Amber, his sister. "Ethan, something's wrong downtown. The National Guard's blocking the freeway. Don't." Static disconnected. By the time he reached the bridge, the city skyline was blacked out. Only fires burned where the high-rises used to shine. The cars ahead were stopped in a line of twisted metal. People had abandoned them, doors open, belongings scattered like confetti. At first, Ethan thought they were refugees, until he saw the way they moved. Stumbling, twitching, head snapping toward sound. A woman tried to run past him, clutching a child. Something lunged from beneath a car and dragged her down before Ethan could move. He froze, heart hammering, until a soldier yelled from a Humvee up the ramp, "Hey, get off the bridge, they're coming." Gunfire erupted. The smell of cordite and rot filled the air. Ethan ducked behind a sedan, hands shaking. When the firing stopped, there were no soldiers left standing, only the echo of boots and screams, swallowed by the wind. He ran. His apartment was dark. The power had gone hours ago. He barricaded the door with furniture and checked his phone again. no signal. The emergency alert app repeated one message: shelter in place. Do not trust anyone showing aggression or loss of motor control. He found an old police scanner in the closet. Through the static came frantic voices. Containment failed. Sectors 7 through 10 compromised. Byte transmission confirmed. Do not. The signal cut out. Ethan looked out the window. The streets were alive with shadows moving in jerks and fits, chasing sound. Someone pounded on his door. He raised the baseball bat in his hand and whispered, "Amber." No answer, only another thud. The pounding came again, followed by a man's voice. "Please let me in, they're coming." Ethan hesitated, then unlatched the door just an inch. The man outside was covered in sweat and dust, eyes wide. "They bit my wife," he gasped. "I had to, she turned, she tried to." He trailed off, trembling. Ethan pulled him inside and bolted the door again. The man collapsed on the couch, clutching his arm. The sleeve was soaked in blood. "It's just a scratch," he said. "I swear." Ethan stared at it. The teeth marks were clear. By dawn, the man wasn't breathing. By noon, he was. Ethan left him in the hall, locked the door, and tried not to listen to the sounds of fingernails scraping from the other side. 3 days without power. The city had fallen silent except for sirens looping endlessly somewhere far away. Ethan rationed what food he had left: canned beans, water from the tub. But then came the smell. Rot, not just outside anymore. He decided to leave. He packed a backpack, water, knife, first aid kit, flashlight. As he stepped into the stairwell, the emergency lights flickered red. Somewhere below, something groaned. He crept down the steps, holding his breath. When he reached the lobby, he saw the front doors shattered, and dozens of them clustered around the vending machine, tearing at plastic and metal alike. Their movements were twitching, jerky, desperate. Ethan turned toward the back exit, but one of them lifted its head. The sound it made wasn't human, a wet gasp, followed by a hiss that turned into a scream. He ran into the dawn light, the city burning behind him. Ethan made it to the outskirts by noon. The air was thick with smoke, and the wind carried ash that stuck to his clothes. Every few miles he passed another wrecked convoy, cars burned down to their frames, bodies left on the asphalt. The government checkpoint signs were riddled with bullet holes. He followed the highway until he saw a gas station standing mostly intact. The windows were shattered, but the pumps were untouched. He crept inside, whispering, "Hello?" No answer, only the hum of flies. He raided the shelves, water bottles, protein bars, a road map. When he reached the back, he heard movement, a faint shuffle from behind the stockroom door. He raised the bat and pushed it open. A man sat against the wall, holding a pistol. "Don't move," he rasped. Ethan froze. The man's uniform marked him as a security guard. His face was gray, lips cracked. "You're not one of them." "No," Ethan said. "Then you better keep moving. They follow the smell now. You stay too long anywhere, they find you." The man coughed, blood spotting his sleeve. He handed Ethan the pistol. "You'll need it more than me." Ethan didn't ask what the man meant by smell until he saw the bandage around his neck, black beneath the cloth. He left before the guard stopped breathing. By dusk, he reached the countryside. The silence there was worse than the city's noise. No engines, no voices, only the wind through the wheat fields and the occasional caw of crows. He found an old farmhouse and decided to spend the night in the barn. He dragged a ladder to the loft and slept there with the pistol in his hand. In the middle of the night, the horses started screaming. He crawled to the edge of the loft and looked down. Shapes moved in the dark, 4, maybe 5 of them, swaying as if uncertain how to walk. Their skin gleamed wet in the moonlight. One reached the horse stall, pressing its face to the animal's flank, sniffing. Then it tore into it with a sound like tearing canvas. Ethan held his breath until dawn. When he climbed down, the floor was empty, except for the blood and hoof prints leading out the door. He left the barn without looking back. 2 days later, he met her. He was walking along a service road when he saw a small figure sitting on the guardrail, a teenage girl, maybe 15, holding a baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. She didn't flinch when she saw him. "You're alive," she said flatly. "So are you," Ethan answered. Her name was Lena. She had been traveling alone since her group was attacked outside Joliet. She didn't say who attacked them, only that it wasn't the infected. Ethan offered her food. She refused. "You can share a fire," she said, "but don't touch my pack." That night they camped by the ruins of a diner. She told him she was heading west, towards some kind of safe zone near Des Moines. She'd heard the signal on a shortwave radio. "If you can hear this, head west. Immunity research, food and shelter provided." Ethan had heard the same transmission. He didn't believe it. But it was better than nowhere. They found shelter in an abandoned farmhouse surrounded by cornfields. It looked untouched, curtains still hanging, dishes still on the table, as if the family had just stepped outside. Ethan checked the rooms, clearing each one with the pistol. Lena stayed near the stairs, whispering. "You think they got out?" "No one gets out anymore," he said. They stayed there for 3 nights. On the second night, Ethan found photos in a drawer, a smiling couple with 2 kids, all wearing church clothes. On the back was written, Easter 2025. By morning, the smell in the cellar told them where the family had gone. Lena stopped talking for a while after that. Ethan didn't blame her. The highway was blocked by wreckage, so they cut through a train yard to reach the next town. Rusted tankers and freight cars stretched for miles. It was quiet, too quiet. Halfway through, they heard it, a faint tapping from inside one of the cars. Lena raised her bat. Ethan approached slowly, climbed the ladder, and opened the latch. Inside were 3 people, dirty, pale, eyes wide. A man, a woman, and a little boy. "Please," the woman whispered, "don't shut it. They come at night." They had been hiding there for over a week. Their supplies were gone. The man's leg was swollen and black with infection, not from a bite, but from a wound gone septic. Ethan gave them food, water, what little he could spare. But when night came, the boy started coughing deep, wet, awful. Lena grabbed his arm. "It's the sound," she said. "They'll hear him." The growls started minutes later, low and scattered, moving closer. The family begged to come with them. Ethan hesitated only a second before closing the hatch. The screams followed them all the way to the fence line. The Mississippi looked like a wall of steel under the gray sky. Its current roared, carrying debris and corpses downstream. Ethan and Lena crouched along the bank, weighing the options. No bridge was intact. The current was too strong for a raft. Swimming meant certain death. They scavenged lumber from a collapsed dock and fashioned a makeshift raft, lashed together with wire and rope. The wood creaked under their weight. Lena paddled first. Ethan followed. They kept their heads low, eyes scanning the shore for movement. Halfway across, Lena froze. Something floated past, a body face down, half submerged, arms reaching like a puppet. Ethan swallowed the rising bile and paddled faster. The water slapped against their legs, carrying the stench of rot. By the time they reached the far shore, both were shivering, muscles burned, hearts hammering. The river behind them carried away more than water. It carried the memory of everyone they had lost. The suburbs outside Davenport were eerily silent. Cars sat in driveways, doors hanging open. Lawns were overgrown. A few houses showed signs of looting, but most were untouched, almost like the owners had vanished overnight. Ethan checked each house for food and weapons. Lena climbed through windows silently, avoiding the creaking boards. They found a grocery store with broken doors. Inside, cans of beans, bags of rice, and bottled water, all carefully stacked. Too carefully. Someone had been here recently. Then they heard footsteps in the aisles, not the shuffle of the infected, the soft crunch of sneakers on tile. A man emerged from the shadows, hands raised. He was young, dirty, carrying a crowbar. "Don't shoot, I'm alone." He introduced himself as Cole, a former EMT who had been scavenging supplies. He offered to join them. Lena, wary, kept her back close. Ethan nodded. They left together, but Ethan didn't trust him fully. In this world, the living were often more dangerous than the dead. The trio camped at the edge of endless cornfields. The night was alive with distant shrieks, not human, not animal. Ethan taught Lena how to set perimeter alarms with cans and string. Cole stayed silent most of the evening, watching the horizon like a hawk. At midnight, the wind shifted. The moans grew closer. Ethan could feel them before he saw them, dozens of shapes moving in the dark, drawn by scent and sound. They stayed perfectly still, breath held. The figures passed just beyond the tree line, moving like ghosts. Their eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. "They hunt by smell now," Ethan whispered. Lena nodded, teeth clenched. Cole muttered, "They've been evolving faster than I thought." By morning, they had counted at least 30 infected in the immediate area. By day 5, supplies were running low. They spotted a farmhouse with a functioning well and fields still producing vegetables. An old man answered when they knocked. He was thin, skin weathered like leather, eyes sharp. "You looking for shelter?" he said. "Food," Ethan replied. The man invited them in but warned. "You can eat, but you don't touch the pantry after dark. They come for the smell." That night, Ethan stayed on watch. Around midnight, Lena stirred and whispered, "I hear them." Ethan looked out. Shadows moved at the edge of the fields, fast and silent. Some carried rifles. Some carried sticks. All were alive, but there was something wrong in the way they moved, jerky, precise, and utterly focused. Morning brought a corpse hung in the cornfield like a scarecrow. A note pinned to its chest, "Move on or next time it's you." They left the farm at dawn. The river of refugees was growing, trucks, vans, a few desperate cars. Some carried supplies, others carried the sick and wounded. The convoy moved slowly, tense. People whispered about safe zones in Iowa, about a research facility supposedly working on a cure. No one knew if it was real. Along the road, they encountered a bridge partially collapsed. A horde of infected swarmed the wreckage. Ethan and Cole improvised, creating a diversion with flares and noise. Lena crouched low in the cab of a truck, vomiting quietly at the stench. By nightfall, they had crossed, but the cost was clear. Exhaustion, fear, and the memory of bodies left behind pressed on them. Ethan realized survival wasn't just about avoiding the infected. It was about surviving the living, the ones who were desperate enough to kill for a can of beans. By the time they reached the outskirts of Cedar Rapids, the infected had changed. No longer slow, shambling creatures, some were faster, more coordinated. Their movements were jerky, unnatural, almost calculating. One lunged from an alleyway at a stray dog, tearing it apart with terrifying speed before Ethan could even react. Cole, watching, muttered, "This isn't just the virus spreading, it's adapting." Ethan saw the evidence: bite marks that healed, a survivor with red sores developing strange rigidity in joints. The virus wasn't just killing anymore, it was evolving. Lena's hands shook as she gripped her bat. "Are we even leaving this alive?" Ethan didn't answer. There was no answer. The only plan was to keep moving west toward the supposed safe zone and hope it existed. By nightfall, smoke rose from the interstate. A convoy of trucks had been ambushed. Ethan, Lena, and Cole approached cautiously. They were met by men with scarves over their faces and rifles slung low. The stench of gunpowder and burnt rubber filled the air. "State your business," the leader barked. They were scavengers, raiders who had taken control of the abandoned highway. They didn't care about the infected, only about supplies. Ethan handed over half of their canned goods to avoid conflict. Cole whispered, "This is worse than the dead. At least they follow instinct." By morning, the raiders had left, taking everything valuable, leaving the survivors only with fear and empty stomachs. A small tributary blocked their path. They found an old pontoon boat tethered to a dock. Ethan inspected it. Rusted motor, fuel can half full. Night came as they pushed it into the water. Shadows flickered along the bank, infected, but far fewer than the last city. Suddenly the motor sputtered and died. In the dark, shapes emerged from the water, faster than expected. Ethan and Lena paddled frantically with oars, Cole keeping watch with the pistol. They made it to the far shore, soaked, exhausted, and silent. They spent the next hour catching their breath, listening to the river's hum. Survival didn't feel like a victory anymore, just a temporary reprieve. They stumbled upon a small cabin at the edge of the Iowa woodlands. For a moment, it felt safe: walls, roof, a chimney. Inside, dust and cobwebs, but also canned food hidden in a cupboard. They barricaded the doors and set a perimeter. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Every sound in the forest sounded alive: branches snapping, leaves rustling, the faint echo of footsteps that weren't theirs. Lena whispered, "Do you think anyone's left out there who's still human?" Ethan wanted to lie. He wanted to tell her yes, but the truth, that most people had either fled, been killed, or turned, tasted bitter in his mouth. Morning came, and with it, the realization that the infected were now starting to appear in the forest, faint shadows, jerky silhouettes moving between the trees. After 3 days in the cabin, they packed what little they had and moved west again. A billboard advertised a research facility, safe zone 50 miles. A desperate lure or truth, they didn't know. Along the road, abandoned cars lined the shoulder. Inside one, a survivor scribbled on the window with a finger. "Don't trust anyone. They follow the smell, don't stop." The note made them pause, but hunger and exhaustion forced their pace. Every step, every mile, the forest behind them seemed alive. By dusk, they spotted smoke on the horizon, a small town, seemingly intact. Ethan, Lena, and Cole approached cautiously. The world hadn't been kind, but this might be the first sign of hope they'd seen in weeks. Or the last. Cedar Hollow looked untouched from a distance. Smoke spiraled from chimneys, fences still intact, lights flickering in some windows. Ethan, Lena, and Cole approached slowly. The streets were empty, eerily quiet. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and decay. Inside the town hall, a group of survivors had organized a council. They were armed, suspicious, and tired. "You're lucky we didn't shoot you on sight," said a woman with a shotgun slung across her chest. "We don't trust strangers." Ethan explained their journey. Lena stayed silent, scanning the room. Cole noticed the tension. The council members were more afraid of each other than the dead. That night in the safe house they were assigned, Ethan lay awake, listening to whispers outside. The infected were quieter here, but something else lingered. Humans who would kill for food without hesitation. The next morning, Ethan and Lena attended a council meeting. The survivors had established rules. No one goes out alone. Supplies are rationed strictly. Anyone showing signs of infection is isolated immediately. Cole, growing uneasy, whispered to Ethan, "They're acting like they're running a prison, not a town." Ethan knew he was right. The virus had changed the world, but so had fear. Humans were adapting too, forming hierarchies, imposing brutal rules. Outside, shadows moved. Not all were infected. Some survivors were scouting the perimeter. Ethan noticed the subtle twitch of the eyes, the way they carried weapons at all times. Paranoia had replaced trust. Ethan and Lena went on a supply run with a group of 4 survivors. The grocery store was looted, but an old pharmacy remained untouched. Inside, the smell of chemicals made their noses burn. As they rifled through shelves, a sound echoed, soft shuffling, then a wet thud. A mutated infected staggered from a back aisle. Its movements were faster, more erratic than any they'd seen. Its eyes glowed faint red, and its skin had begun to darken, almost leathery. The group froze. Ethan fired a single shot. The creature fell, twitching. Cole whispered, "This isn't just mutation. This is evolution." The town's walls had kept the original infection out, but now it was creeping in, testing the defenses. Back at the safe house, the council debated whether to expand the perimeter. Some wanted to fortify, others wanted to leave the town. Ethan noticed small tensions. One man hoarded extra rations. Another argued about who deserved the limited beds. A couple had disappeared, leaving behind notes that suggested they were sneaking out to scavenge. Lena finally spoke. "We can't survive if we start fighting each other." Ethan knew the truth. The dead weren't their only threat. Hunger, fear, and desperation were already breaking the living apart. That night, alarms blared. The mutated infected had found a weak point in the outer fence. They weren't alone. A few desperate humans had joined the horde, either by accident or design. Shadows moved with terrifying coordination, more intelligent than the shamblers they'd faced on the highway. Ethan, Lena, and Cole fought from the walls, throwing Molotovs and firing rifles. Lena screamed as one of the creatures lunged at the gate, knocking it off its hinges. By dawn, the town's outer defenses were breached. Casualties were high. Ethan's hands were slick with sweat and blood. As they surveyed the devastation, Ethan realized the truth. The apocalypse wasn't just the virus. It was everything the virus had revealed in humanity: fear, selfishness, and the will to survive at any cost. After days of travel through burned-out towns, they finally saw it: a fortified compound on the horizon, surrounded by high fences and watchtowers. Smoke spiraled from chimneys. Lights flickered through the dusk. The gate was guarded by men with rifles. A sign read, "Immunity Research Facility, authorized personnel only." Inside, the facility was eerily organized. Scientists in hazmat suits moved between labs, scanning blood samples and feeding data into computers. One of the guards eyed Ethan and Lena suspiciously. "You're not on the roster," he said. Ethan explained their journey. After tense deliberation, they were allowed inside, but under strict observation. The research director, a tall woman named Dr. Ivers, explained the situation. "We've been working on a vaccine, but the virus is evolving faster than anticipated. We need live samples to complete the formula." Cole muttered under his breath. "So we're the guinea pigs." Ethan realized she wasn't lying. Inside the facility, they saw survivors quarantined in isolation rooms. Some were already infected. Others had been exposed but showed no symptoms. Dr. Ivers offered a choice: participate in trials that might lead to immunity or death. Leave the facility, knowing the outside world was collapsing. Lena wanted to stay. The thought of safety was tempting. Ethan hesitated. "We can't save everyone," he said. "Then what's the point of surviving?" Lena replied. Cole decided immediately he would risk it. Ethan and Lena debated until the night fell. Meanwhile, the sound of distant infected faster, more aggressive, reminded them that time was running out. During the night, alarms blared. One of the isolated survivors had broken containment. The virus had mutated further. These new infected were terrifyingly fast, nearly intelligent in their coordination. They tore through the lab corridors, attacking both researchers and patients indiscriminately. Ethan and Lena grabbed weapons and tried to secure the hallways. Cole ran ahead, shouting orders. They barricaded doors and moved survivors into safe rooms. Ethan realized the horrifying truth. The facility's walls were a thin layer of safety. Beyond them, the world had already changed permanently. The outbreak forced them to navigate the lower levels, a maze of pipes, storage rooms, and sealed doors. The sounds of the infected echoed through the concrete corridors. Lena clutched Ethan's arm, whispering, "I can't see the end of this." Every room revealed horrors, failed experiments, blood-stained floors, notes scribbled in panic. Some infected were partially controlled, trained with chemicals or stimuli to slow mutation, but none were safe. They found the main lab, where the vaccine samples were kept. Dr. Ivers stood over a machine extracting viral strains. "Take them," she said. "If you get outside, it's humanity's only chance." Ethan realized escape was the only choice. The facility was already compromised. They emerged from the facility through an emergency exit into the forest. The mutated infected were everywhere, some stalking, some sprinting in packs. Cole was bitten during a scramble, forcing Ethan and Lena to leave him behind. Lena screamed, but Ethan knew it was the only way to survive. They ran through the woods for hours, carrying the viral samples. By dawn, the forest opened onto a road. Helicopters flew in the distance, signs that help might exist beyond the horizon. Ethan and Lena stumbled onto the highway, exhausted, bloodied, and shaking. Behind them, the screams of the infected faded into the morning mist. Ethan looked at Lena and whispered, "We survived for now." But in the back of his mind, he knew the virus had changed the world permanently, and no one would ever truly be safe again. The world was ash, the living were scarred, and humanity's survival was fragile, hanging on a thread carried westward by two exhausted travelers.